Hello ladies and gentlemen, and today I'll be talking to you guys about the story of Alex MacGregor. Now, this is a story about a Scot-Irishman, I guess you can call him that, but in truth he is actually one of America's most forgotten heroes in American history. Now, how should I start this off? Well, in truth, if we were to actually take a look at Alex MacGregor, we should actually take a look back in his history books, in which he was originally born in the early months of, it states in technically around 1720, in which at this point in time Scotland is already part of Great Britain, and in doing so, well, pretty much we already get the point. The Scots really don't like the British. And in doing so, this is actually what happens. Pretty much, most of the time over, his father is Darlan MacGregor. I'm sorry if any MacGregors are pissed or Scots are pissed that I can pronounce that correctly. Anyways, who of which was a Protestant Scotsman, and of which his mother, being Irish, was actually devoutly Catholic. Now, the reason why these two were conjoined in the first place was actually because of the fact, pretty much, well, royal houses or something. You get the point. But now, in truth, though, both Donovan's mother, or should I say, MacGregor's mother, and including even his father and including uncle, were all Catholics, of which despised the British crown, especially after what happened to Prince King Charles and such. Now, in truth, in the process, it was actually stated that from the following decades over, when Alex MacGregor was born, he was actually the eldest of four children. In doing so, these four children were of the names of Alex, Dawn being of, well, Dawn as Dawn MacGregor being a female, and as well even Ember MacGregor, another female, and as well the youngest being Louis MacGregor, of which would later on be part of the British Continental War in the Americas later on in history, but I will get to him some other time. Now, Alex MacGregor is pretty much one of the probably most famous and forgotten, mainly because of the fact he actually took part at the Battle of Culloden. Now, at this point in time, in the year of 1746 of April 16th, he was already 26 years old, and in doing so, he actually fought on the battlefield of Culloden. How he survived and escaped is little known, but it is stated he somehow managed to get over to the colonies, and there, by the time we go over into history books, we actually get into the war known as the 7 Years' War, or as in the Americas we call it, the French and Indian War. Now, here in the years of 1754 to 1763, MacGregor actually wanted to fight back against the British, and as well wanted revenge of what happened at the Battle of Culloden. So, what did he do? Well, he did what any Scotsman would do. He would actually go to any type of pub and such to actually, well, get anyone that wanted to fight against, well, the English. In fact, Alex MacGregor could actually speak fluent in both Celtic languages of Irish and Scottish, and as well was even fluent in German, Dutch, and as well French, and even later on in many Native American tongues such as Mohawk and Cherokee. Now, of how he actually managed to do this is still undebated. Some say he was technically a tanner or something like that, but most historians actually speculate he might have been a frontiersman, of which most of the time he spent his entire life, well, in the, frontier. And which is probably why he actually got so many supporters. And as well, he was actually looked to be a Robin Hood figure of the colonies. However, he would actually help out the French and the Native Americans against the British, and in doing so, many Scots and Irish that fought with him actually, as well, later on were known as MacGregor's Rangers. The MacGregor's Rangers will later on be replaced by a different ranger unit in history that had a different name, but MacGregor's Rangers were still famous in history books. I'll talk about it later on in the video. Now, MacGregor's Rangers are extremely, well, in-depth in the fighting field, but as well, MacGregor actually knew of how to beat the British. And it wasn't actually fighting them on open field combat. He knew that the best way to defeat them was actually to use ambush strategy, guerrilla warfare, in our modern term times. He as well actually told his men to attack the British and lower their morale. And unlike many times over, he and his men actually wore kilts or tartans of some sort, just to actually reveal to the British that they were not sympathizing to the British crown. So in other words, they pretty much either wore kilts or some sort of tartan over their, well, regular clothing. Now as well, it was even stated they would have actually worn a Glengarry, or in this case a Scottish beret, as some of you guys cannot pronounce the term. And as well, in a type of lapel area, they would actually wear a white feather. Now I hear you guys already. Templar, what's a white feather supposed to represent? Well, if you guys don't understand, this is supposed to represent that they are on the side of Bonnie Prince Charlie. In other words, Jacobites. In which a lot of Scots still support Bonnie Prince Charlie a lot more than anyone else. And as well, these men would actually wear these on the battlefield, and as well even hear the rallying cry, for Charlie, for Culloden. And in doing so, they actually massacred British soldiers on a colonial area. One of the most famous battles that took place was technically stated to have been somewhere near modern-day Monmouth, as they call it. I am not so certain if that was true, but it is stated, though, this is before the American Revolution. And during the war of the French and Indian War, it was stated that, well, MacGregor and his Rangers were actually using guerrilla-type tactics, and in doing so, they kind of put fear into the British Army. One type of a major thing they did was actually to be really quick, and actually extremely fast, faster than any convoy. In fact, they managed to attack British convoys from left and right, and as well trap them and slaughter them. It was even stated he even went up against none other than a famous figure in history known as George Washington. And was even actually able to even shoot, I repeat, shoot George Washington in the shoulder. However, it didn't mortally wound him, it just scraped off his lapel piece. Of which, Washington, fearing this, actually couldn't face him, seeing as though that these MacGregor's Rangers actually managed to kill most of Washington's militia. And the most scary part is, Washington himself would later on use the same type of tactic on the British. However, MacGregor didn't like the British, so you can see why he would later on be feared in history books. However, MacGregor and his Rangers were actually mainly famous for was actually their light combat tactic. Now, you guys already just talked about this. Well, I'm not talking about it the whole time. In fact, it was actually stated they were supposed to move light on the field, and that means take any type of supplies from an enemy convoy, their food, their rationings. That way they break their morale. And as well, they even took their weaponry. Now, here's the thing though. Most of the time, they actually took the muskets. Now, it was stated they would actually take 3 types of rifles, of which one of them being the Philadelphia long rifle in history, or many call it the Kentucky long rifle, whatever you want to call it. But they would use that design, and as well even the British Brown Bess, of which they would even use the bayonet attachment for a new version of the Highland Charge, of which they would fire the musket while charging down. This terrified British morale even more. And as well, MacGregor himself, he always carried a double-barrel type hunting rifle. This hunting rifle was technically his specially prepared one. Now, this isn't a breech loading, this is a muzzle loading design version back in the older days. And the thing is, he actually fired up from a 16 to 12 gauge shell slug. Now here's the thing, if you get hit with that, you know you're dead. There's no way you're coming back from it. Now, MacGregor and his Rangers actually managed to demoralize British morale so much that he himself actually went as far as to actually order his men to dress up in British captured uniforms from dead Scottish soldiers who were fighting for the crown. Now, it is stated though, when this actually happened, it was stated that they actually, well, when they dress upon it, they actually look just like the British soldier. Or Scottish enlistment soldier, you know what I mean. Anyways, it was actually stated sometime after an engagement with Washington, around the year of 1761, I think it was. It was actually stated that the following actually happened, that he actually managed to attack a fort and in the process, well, sabotage their artillery, weaponry, and as well, even as far off, they actually made their 2-month supply of rations into only 2 days, which would later on still be seen even in the American Revolution. It was actually stated that MacGregor and his Rangers would later on attack each type of fort, going in and out through the entire area of the Appalachian Mountain Range, kind of destroying and demonstrating that the British morale can easily be destroyed. However, unfortunately, MacGregor and his Rangers never fully won, seeing as though the French and the British kind of both stopped fighting. However, MacGregor wanted to keep fighting, but he would get his chance later on, around 2 to 3 years later, of which happened in 1765. Now, here's the thing. I can hear you guys already. Templar, didn't it start sometime a little further? Not exactly. In fact, it was actually stated to have been the most demoralizing event in history, but in truth, in 1765, he kind of gained the reputation of actually attacking British soldiers from within. In other words, he was technically spreading a type of new newspaper in American history books. However, many people are still wondering whether or not this is true. Now, another thing about him, though, it was technically about around the time we lead up to the American history is when we start to see a perform in history, of which leading to the Boston Tea Party, or as we call it, the Boston, or as well before that, the Boston Massacre, in which he overheard the fact that the, events are downfalling. And in doing so, in the year of 1775, it was technically around his time to shine. However, around 1765, it was stated that some weird events did happen. I'm still unknown what happened. All I know is that it was stated he might have been a frontiersman who might have had skirmishes with British soldiers, more or less. Other people say he might have just been in a drunken brawl with a bunch of British redcoats. We still don't know. But it is stated that sometime around to the year of 1775, it was stated that he was fully engaged in the War of American Independence. However, he wasn't technically on the side of the colonialists. He was just wanting to get a one-up on the British crown, but still, he was a good ally if you think about it. Now as well, the British actually, most of the time remember him, mainly because of the fact of his, in the American Revolution, he kind of was, quote-unquote, did horrendous things to the British Army. I wouldn't go that far. But it is stated, though, he wouldn't actually see the Boston Massacre or the Boston Tea Party. But when when the so-called phrase, all of England was afloat and surrounded Boston, harbor, that's when MacGregor and his men had a chance to shine. And in doing so, they dressed up in the same type of British uniforms that they had stolen so long ago. And in doing so, they actually rode into the harbor dressed in dressed in British uniforms. Now here you guys are ready. Templar, this sounds a little messed up. Well, the thing is, the British Redcoats, they didn't learn from their previous engagements. And as well, it's the kind of the scary part is, though, MacGregor and his Rangers were extremely, good at their job, at sabotaging the British morale and supply line. And another cool part about this is actually when they went as far, they actually kind of one-upped King George. I'll get to that very soon. In which it was actually stated that when all of Boston was technically surrounded by the British fleet, MacGregor and his Rangers actually planted small bombs onto one ship. In which, when the ship, went off, it was actually stated that it destroyed 2 ships. Both the one and including the one right next to it, but damaged at least only 3 others. And which MacGregor was wanting to destroy the entire fleet, however, it didn't work to his advantage. It was stated that in newspapers he was wanting to slaughter all the British redcoats and as well cover the sea with their blood. However, many people don't even know if this is true or not, because due to the fact it might have just been a publicity stunt used by the British to actually show him of how much of a savage he is. Well, we don't know. But it is stated, though, that little attack kind of destroyed British morale, though. And as well, he and his men managed to slip back into the night, away from Boston and up to New York, or as well down to Pennsylvania and into Georgia. And as well, later on, they would even go further on to actually keep attacking British supply lines all throughout the colonies. And this would actually demoralize the British even further. One famous event, though, that actually led him to actually be even famous was actually the factor of reasoning of which he was actually famous for, his sabotage of conflict, in which the British even gave him a nickname, MacGregor the Red. Now, this is a weird one in history books. Why, you guys might ask? Well, it's kind of like this. He didn't technically was stated to have red hair. In fact, we don't even know if he did. But it was actually stated by British newspapers that the man actually washed his hair in the blood of British soldiers. I don't think that's actually true at all, if you ask me. But the thing is, we really don't know. The history is faded through the history books, and unfortunately, we only find little information about him. Whenever we do, though, it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. In fact, he's like here, there, here, there. It's like a newspaper clipping in each state, or colony at this time. But as well, he was actually mostly famous going near Savannah, Georgia sometime around, or modern Savannah, Georgia, in which, in the process, he and his men actually managed to surround a massive British convoy, of which attacking them for at least 3 nights and 3 days. This would demoralize British morale so badly that it would not work. And as well, a new type of form of the Highland Charge was created with a so-called Highland Yell. This Highland Yell was extremely terrifying, and which would later evolve into the so-called Southern Rebel Yell that we see in the American Civil War, of which many people don't remember that part into it. But now, it is stated, though, in history books, by the time Valley Forge comes up, here's the thing, and as well even at the Battle of Monmouth, it was actually stated that MacGregor and his Rangers were actually crucial to the supply line of the British, of the entire, American army, or the colonialist army. And as well, he and his men actually went as far as to actually sabotage and steal from supply trains, and as well, even bring them back to Valley Forge the next day. However, we still don't know much about that information. But now, I also nearly left out another crucial part in history. It was actually stated that MacGregor, it was actually at the Battle of Concord. Now, if that's true, we still don't know really, because of the fact Lexington and Concord are completely different, seeing as though he wasn't at Lexington, but it is stated he might have been at Concord. Now, many historians actually do speculate that he might have arrived there at the last minute and attacked the British from the rear. If that's true, we still don't know, but if it is, I would like to see that in a film about him. And as well, he and his men actually managed to surround them and open fire upon the British redcoats from the rear, while the other colonial forces pretty much opened fire from the front, in which massacring the British soldiers in the process. Now, MacGregor and his forces actually did manage to go as far as to keep fighting in history, and as well to destroy supply trains and such, and as well even to go as far as to, create what I might call today as improvised bombs. In fact, these were also using as men who were also nicknamed the terrorists of the colonies, or the terror of the colonies, as they were also known, in which they would even actually have publicity stunts, even as formed as stated to the following, that he and his men were nothing more than savages, of which acted with the most cruelest of ideals, and slew the innocent, and as well murdered the children in their sleep, while they raped the women, and made the men watch. Now, that's a British newspaper, so I don't think that's actually real. But we do know that from history books, it is stated that MacGregor and his Rangers actually went as far as to aiding the American forces at Valley Forge and Monmouth, in which, later on in the process, demoralized the British morale even further, mainly by attacking their supply trains by using guerrilla warfare tactics. They go into the city and attack, and as well, disappear the next second. This terrified the British soldiers so much that the end of the process would rather not be anywhere near the coastline. As well, it was stated, though, that MacGregor and his Rangers actually did destroy a British supply ship that was supposed to sail towards the south from New York Harbor down towards somewhere in the south. However, it never reached its destination, in which in doing so it blew up. How? We don't really know. Some say that MacGregor actually and his men might have been on the ship when it set sail and lit a bomb and then jumped into the water. Some say he put a bomb in there without them knowing, with a lit fuse. We don't really know. The history books still don't give us information about him. But it is stated, though, that while fighting in the military combat, he and his men actually went as far as to slaughter British troops and as well make American morale even higher. If it wasn't for him, the type of American dream might have actually been died off maybe at Valley Forge. Seeing as though if him and his men hadn't actually done raiding parties on the British, or as well even attacked British scavengers who were trying to find, any type of, berries or food, then in the process it might have ended up differently. However, he even went as far as to even forge British documents and as well even British money. This fooled the British so much that even in America, he was actually known as America's most greatest forger, in which he actually got made fake orders that were supposedly from the British officers' high command. And in doing so, he actually tricked them. It's kind of impressive, though, if you think about it. Now, and later on in history books, it is stated, though, that MacGregor and his Rangers later on took part in the later on offenses at the Battle of Yorktown. However, we still don't know if that's true. But we do know that a scene that is mainly remembered about him is actually seen in the movie The Patriot. And yes, I'm talking about them sailing into upon those British ships while dressed as British redcoats. You get my point. But the thing is, MacGregor and his men were actually really famous. But the thing is, MacGregor dies a very tragic death. It was stated that he took a fatal wound to his kneecap, of which he later on died in the year of none other than, as it states, 1784, in which that's actually a year after the war ends. And it's stated that the bullet that hit him was so badly damaging at his kneecap that it actually bursted his, main artery. And in doing so, he slowly bled to death without his knowing. However, MacGregor's Rangers would still be remembered in history books mainly because of their heroic acts on the field of battle, but not on the American Revolution, but during the War of 1812. During this war of 1812, it was stated that the MacGregor's Rangers actually fought at the Battle of New Orleans, and there they attacked with skirmishing tactics as well. MacGregor and his Rangers used light combat tactics, of which were light weaponry, short weaponry, hand-to-hand, in which clubs, axes, tomahawks, daggers, even short swords, or as well, even 3 types of firearms. As well, it was even stated MacGregor and his men even carried technically as many as 5 pistols on them, just so that way they don't have to reload. You can see why he and his men are pretty much almost forgotten members in history. However, later on people will remember them for their heroic acts, and as well would actually later on be seen during World War II when the Rangers are called for, using the same type of tactics during this conflict, or as well, even during the American Civil War. When America was technically divided, there were 2 Ranger battalions, or 2 MacGregor Ranger battalions, which were created. One for the South and one for the North. However, the North didn't use theirs so much. But the South, though, had what you might call a checkered plaid clothing, or checkered plaid type cloth, of which would make like a handkerchief or a bandana, of which they would use to pretty much cover their faces, or as well, he would even actually sometimes go as far as have a blanket that would wrap around their shoulders. This would represent who they were, and which is why the Union was terrified of it. But still, though, the history of these guys are still forgotten, and MacGregor and his Rangers are still one of the most famous people in history. Oh, but if you guys are probably also wondering if I forgot about what happened with King George, well, here's the thing. In a statue sometime in Virginia, I think it was. No, wait, my bad. Virginia, yeah, Georgia. It was stated that he actually had managed to bike off a bust of the head of King George itself, and as well had sent it back to England. It's just kind of hilarious with this hilarious form. Now, though, what you guys might ask, what did they do with fellow Scots when they captured them? Well, when they found their Scottish soldiers, it was stated they're fighting for the British. It was stated that they actually went as far as to marking the forehead with the letter T, and even shooting them in public. However, this sounds more like British propaganda if you ask me. Tomato, either way. We still don't know if it's true or not. But the thing is, MacGregor and his Rangers are the most forgotten people in history, of which are pretty much still remembered, but yet not remembered. This is why we gotta remember Alex MacGregor, of which he is most famous for. But as well, he was also famous for actually fighting even against his own nephew, from his own sister, Ember MacGregor, who of which married an English nobleman, and so on and so on. You get the point. But in the process, the following does happen, that he ends up killing him accidentally, of which nearly destroying the bloodline. MacGregor died without any heirs or any family. It was stated that when he died in the arms of his fellow countrymen, his soldiers, his fellow patriots of liberty, his Rangers. To this day, MacGregor has still not been found on the cemetery plaques, and unfortunately no historical documentary is remembered of it. There are only bits and scraps of paper of him that are still not technically found, and even if we were to find him today, it's still unknown if we ever will. Though it is stated that when he was buried pointing west, facing the lands of the east, towards the lands of his birth. There, he would always return to it, one day. As well, it was stated that while being buried, he would be buried in a land that resembled just like his homeland. Of where this is, we still do not know. Many say it's in the far north, many say it's in the far south. It's still unknown to this day. However, it is stated that while fighting for many times over, MacGregor and his Rangers were remembered for history, and as well would never be forgotten. Thank you guys for actually watching this video. If you guys like this and want, please leave a like, as well leave a comment down below if you guys want me to talk about anything else about the American Revolution in history. I will get right on to it. As well, guys, subscribe, and as well click that bell button for more notifications. As well, it will also help the channel grow. If you guys also want to see the type of events that MacGregor and his men were part of, I will leave links down below in the description. And as well, if you guys actually also want to know more information of later on type episodes, also I will leave a link to my Facebook page. Anyways, guys, this has been Templar, and have a nice day.